Hey everyone, this is Chris Davis, your video and feed producer here at 4Player Network, and this is my list of the top 10 games of 2015. As hard as it is to believe, we will be celebrating the 20th anniversary of the release of Metal Gear Solid for the PlayStation 1 in just a couple years' time. A game that went on to define not only the stealth genre of games, but also what it is to be a cinematic storyteller in an interactive environment. Following Metal Gear Solid's release came worldwide acclaim and a clear need to continue Solid Snake's story. However, the prospects of a Metal Gear Solid 2 were several years off, and striking while the iron was still hot was exactly what Konami decided to do when, in September 1999, the same month in which Sega released their final console, and DMA Design would unleash the second Grand Theft Auto game, the Japanese publisher opted to give North America a standalone expansion to Metal Gear Solid, subtitled VR Missions. While Metal Gear Solid 1 continued to bathe in a sea of praise and fond reflection, VR Missions is remembered by many to be the icing on the cake for its plethora of gameplay modes, extra content, and, most excitingly, the ability to play missions as everyone's favorite cyborg ninja, Frank Yeager. So why exactly is it that I'm giving you a history lesson about a game that arrived in homes 17 years ago in the middle of a list of the best games of 2015? Simple. Because Volume, the game that is occupying your screen at the moment, finds itself as a fantastic homage to the greatness that was VR Missions. Volume comes to us from developer Mike Bethel, creator of 2012's rather great Thomas Was Alone, so right off the bat you know you can expect a well-crafted story. And for the most part it is, as we are treated to the adventure of Robert Loxley, a citizen of a dystopian corporate-run city, who, with the aid of his AI companion Alan, runs security simulations of homes, businesses, and other locales of the richest and most corrupt, and broadcasts the results to a growing live audience of the poor and destitute, allowing them to rob and potentially dismantle the regime that haunts its citizenry. Taking place over the course of 3 hours, players control Loxley through 100 simulations as he is systematically hunted by Guy Gisborne, the head of the corporate-run power trying to maintain order. Robin Hood similarities aside, the neo-cyberpunkish tale of Loxley's How to Rob from the Rich guide broadcast is very well written throughout, though it's done so in quite a limited fashion, demanding that you complete several levels before being given the next bit of story dialogue and plot discussion. It's not exactly gratuitous in its plot size or the rate at which it's conferred, but it's still quite good and complements the progression structure of the game. At its heart, Volume is very much like classic Metal Gear Solid, a top-down isometric perspective played out over virtual representations of rooms and populated with guards patrolling sentries throughout. Despite the formula being distinctly old school, the end result is still rather great thanks to the level design and the tools Loxley is given to complete his tasks. The structure is simple. Enter a level, collect all the gems to be found, and reach the exit point without being killed by the guards. As the game progresses, new types of guards and level obstructions come in that challenge you to figure out just how to get around them, as well as new gadgets that will help distract or otherwise temporarily disable an opponent. Most of the game focuses you on a linear progression of tools to use, but by the last quarter of Volume, you find yourself being allowed multiple strategies to try instead of being forced to accept a singular one. Even if you find yourself frustrated at the repetitive try-again nature of the game, Volume includes a fair assortment of checkpoints throughout each level, ensuring that you don't have to worry about completely restarting sections with nary a load screen. Volume is by far not a demanding time sink at all. You can complete all 100 of the story maps within a good 4-hour period, and whether the game sticks with you or not will depend on how much time you're willing to devote to the Volume community's abundance of custom-made levels. At the end of the day though, Volume is some terrific fun for those wanting a classic stealth experience with a fun story that doesn't ship with half-hour cutscenes its predecessor is known for. Definitely check this one out. 2015 was supposed to be the year in which the promise of a new generation of consoles would finally bear fruit in the form of amazing games that simply weren't possible previously. What we received was, well, a mixed bag, thanks to a large amount of sequels focused on only improved design, as well as new titles that received plenty of hype but were particularly or completely robbed of their potential by questionable design choices and the like. Metal Gear Solid 5 had so much going for it coming into this past year, but due in no small part to a series of absolute press and public disasters, culminating in the dismissal of Hideo Kojima and the disassembly of his namesake studio, people had quite a bit to worry about going into the next entry in the franchise. What we got was, well, great for the most part, and it's the reason why it's my number 8 game of the year. Structurally, MGS5 has some exceptional potential. A console-developed Peace Walker sequel that bridges the gap between the original game and MGS3? A focus on building your own outer heaven and recruiting your own troops by way of hilarious balloon abductions? A completely refined stealth system complemented with an open-world structure? What's not to love on the paper? With the exception of the stealth system, though, everything wasn't nearly as fleshed out as you'd want it to be. Outer Heaven was simply building struts that lacked in any way a way to really customize them other than the color. Troop recruitment became mostly a numbers game focused on abilities and their aptitude for timed-out sight missions, and the open world we were given gave us plenty of room to explore, but nothing to really find or accomplish outside of a mission. By far, though, the game's biggest failing was its story. For 30 missions, you are presented a story that lacked depth and intriguing character growth, the primary antagonist being only fleshed out towards the end by half-baked monologuing. Instead of ending things there, however, we were given what's called the second chapter of Metal Gear Solid 5, when it really feels like unstructured and disorganized plot elements that could have easily been properly used dozens of hours beforehand. Presented as is, the game ends with absolutely no conclusion to the story to be found, instead flashing us forward in time and revealing some titillating facts about what we've been experiencing, while at the same time leaving major plot points criminally unfulfilled. The biggest failing of the story, though, is the characterization of our principal cast, as it twists them all in absurdly unsatisfying ways, bends our perspectives to the point of snapping under pressure of unrealistic and uncalled for personal motivations. There's been a lot of positive things said by the other guys here at 4Player, and for the most part, they've covered everything I really enjoyed. Fun gameplay scenarios, the fantastic buddy system, good gunplay, and much more makes Metal Gear Solid 5 so very much an appealing game. However, I'd be remiss if I failed to mention the inclusion of the game's PvP Mother Base invasion mechanic. Despite the disappointing nature of Mother Base, the ability to invade or defend against a competitor online at almost any given time of the day is rather fantastic fun, if exceptionally intense, especially for non-lethal players like me. The act of invading another player's base as quietly as possible, abducting their soldiers and materials, and reaching the extraction point can be incredibly fulfilling to try, and it is something I encourage anyone who is a fan of Dark Souls or Watch Dogs-style invasions to experience. All in all, Metal Gear Solid 5 does do a lot of great things, but it betrays so many more things that could have, and perhaps should have, been. It was a great game to play, but it's definitely not worthy of going any higher on my list. Alright, before you attack me for putting Godzilla as my number 8 of 2015, let alone ahead of fucking Metal Gear Solid 5, please allow me a second to address just exactly why it's here. Okay? Alright, good. Now, ever since I was a kid, I've simply loved Toho's Big City Stomper. Watching giant monsters battle one another amidst a sea of incredibly well-crafted miniature cities was and continues to be one of the easiest ways to occupy my time. I own all the films. I've got plenty of merchandise, and I've played a lot of the games. Statistically, though, it's a bit rare to actually find a particularly good one that doesn't try to have some exceptionally weird gimmick to it. The Pipeworks series of titles that ran from 2002 to 2007 are in most people's eyes the best there's ever been, and that statement is fairly accurate. However, the trilogy of games Pipeworks created during that span of time are distinctly of one genre: wrestling. A method of gameplay for giant monster games that goes all the way back to SNK's classic King of the Monsters from 1991. To me, the purest essence of a Godzilla game is built upon three primary pillars of gameplay: city destruction, monster combat, and the military's response to both of these. Many Godzilla games are able to simulate one of these items at a time, but not all three. Pipeworks games focused on monster combat. Godzilla Generations for the Sega Dreamcast focused on city destruction. Godzilla Archipelago Shock for the Sega Saturn focused on the military response to the kaiju threat. However, none of these games released up until 2015 had really ever attempted or succeeded at building the game upon these three gameplay aspects. In July 2015, we finally got a Godzilla game that did just that. By far, the most impressive thing about the game was its sense of scale. In this new Godzilla, players initially took control of the titular monster through a series of about 10 stages with a focus on growing Godzilla from 50 meters up to and beyond 100. In a way, it felt very much like a Katamari game, wherein you start out small, but by mid-game, you start to realize that you're towering over landscapes and generally being more destructive for the same amount, if not less, effort. Players utilized a tank control scheme a la classic Resident Evil, which is one of the biggest points of contention amongst people because of its inherent outdated nature. However, its implementation is almost mad genius, as it excellently conveys the giant, heavy, and destructive nature of these monsters. Over the course of the Gout of Destruction mode, I loved growing my Godzilla higher and higher, taking advantage of level layouts to gain energy combos, and ensuring that I hit height levels absurdly early, and trouncing any enemy kaiju that decided to take me on. However, the larger my monster got and the more powerful it became, the stronger the military response was, meaning I would have to be selective in just which levels I played through. Godzilla was definitely designed for replayability, and the development team behind it made a modest effort in this department thanks to the kaiju upgrade system, multiple gameplay modes, a monster encyclopedia, and even a diorama mode. Which games these days have a stinking diorama mode? In retrospect, I understand why this new game took a lot of flack from critics and the public alike. At $60, the amount of content is questionable, and the gameplay mechanics are very much love 'em or hate 'em. For me, however, it was almost exactly what I wanted out of a Godzilla game. I smashed buildings, I grew my monsters into unstoppable juggernauts, recreated some of the iconic fights from the series' cinematic past, and I had a ton of fun all the while. It's a game that's definitely not for those that are not enamored with King of the Monsters, but if you're looking for some mindless, environmental destroying fun, and don't mind playing as a rubber-suited giant monster from the 60s or 70s, Godzilla will do you just right. I don't think anyone could ever rightly say that Batman hasn't been one of the most enduring and exciting intellectual properties of the past century. The Cape Crusader has seen great changes from generation to generation, with each iteration attempting to do the character justice in the new times and mediums that he's found in. For gamers, Rocksteady's take on Batman and his ensemble of villains and allies has been one of the greatest interpretations we've ever seen. So going into this new generation, and based on the quality put into Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, there was a lot to be excited for. So I found myself surprised that Arkham Knight, potentially the final entry in the series, was not only seen as the penultimate Batman experience, but also as one of the most polarizing games I think I've ever had the pleasure of playing. As you can gather from what you're watching, yes, I was in the camp that really enjoyed Rocksteady's final foray as the Dark Knight. So much so that it made the number 7 on my list. Arkham Knight was finally the game everyone had been wanting for years from Rocksteady. A chance to play as Batman in a realized Gotham City, filled with villains that were practically screaming for a fresh set of broken ribs and limbs that our hero was all but happy to deliver. What we got, however, was a city empty of civilians, a disappointing titular villain, and, in the most polarizing fashion imaginable, a Batmobile that was more tank than car. While I agree that dissenters have made some good points about these and several more issues found throughout the game, I found myself wearing a Joker-sized grin throughout a lot of my time with it. The Batmobile was pretty much what it needed to be, given the scale of just what the Dark Knight would have to face, and I was fine with it. Was there a particular overemphasis on tank missions? Yeah, sure. However, these sequences were done well enough, and the presence of the rather enjoyable pursuit mode made the tank missions quite forgivable. Chasing down one of the escaping militia lieutenants, dodging rockets all the way, and sideswiping enemy Humvees was fantastically exciting, and sold me after just the second pursuit. Outside of the Batmobile, the hand-to-hand combat, which Rocksteady has always excelled at, somehow became that much better, thanks to the inclusion of a second playable combatant that could be switched to on the fly, or, alternatively, using a well-timed combo against a singular enemy. Fighting alongside the likes of Robin, Nightwing, and Catwoman was rather fantastic thanks to each other's particular style of play. Each fight starring a pair of heroes made for an exciting bout. Some fights which I really wish I could go back and repeat over and over. The potential of a dynamic duo was even hinted at the game's silent predator gameplay in one particular sequence towards the middle of the game, but alas it was never brought up again. It's a missed opportunity for some rather enticing gameplay possibilities, but alas Rocksteady never seems to have found the opportunity to really flesh it out. For me, Batman Arkham Knight was almost everything it needed to be, save for a full, precise conclusion to the Arkham saga. Perhaps WB Montreal will one day give The Dark Knight one last go and answer the confusing, open-ended questions left behind as the game fade away into the credits. But if we had to live with this being the final entry in the Arkham storyline, I'm happy to leave it as it is. When it comes to open world games, few studios are as capable of creating such memorable experiences as Bethesda. From the ruins of Washington, D.C. to the snowy peaks of Skyrim, Bethesda over the past decade has created some incredible games that, with each release, continues to keep the gaming industry in check. Bethesda's latest was a long-awaited return to the Fallout franchise, and with this new iteration came an incredible amount of anticipation. I expected excellence, and, for the most part, we got it with Fallout 4. From the very moment Fallout 4 started, it was clear to me that Bethesda wanted to tell a story this time around, more so than any of their previous games. Sure, you could stack the deck with choice voice actors and perhaps make the player the proverbial chosen one, as had been done in the previous games, but it felt to me like this new entry wanted to be something more than a creative character exploration experience. This time around, I was a husband, or in my case, a wife, who barely survived the fires of nuclear war, only to lose everything when she woke up 2 centuries later to a dramatically altered world. I had a background, a point of motivation, an overreaching goal that gave my character life, something Bethesda's previous efforts were never able to afford the player. No Bethesda game before this had ever pushed me towards the main quest line quite like this one, and sure, while I didn't go running off the beaten path and explored the many various side quests to be found, I found myself returning to the principal storyline, wanting answers and reciprocity for what had been done to my family. Fallout 4 wasn't just a dramatic upgrade in terms of main narrative design either. Entire chunks of the Fallout 3 experience we'd loved years before saw a tremendous upheaval from what we had known them to be. Settlements, for example, were easily one of the biggest and most welcome new arrivals to the Wasteland, as I found myself not only a character of this vast world, but now as a leader, in charge of protecting lives from the rigors of a new, harsh world. From Sanctuary Hills to the castle, from Covenant to the Warwick homestead, I took tremendous pride in building my settlements from lonely outposts of the world into prosperous strongholds, breaking down the ruins of the old world to create the homes of the new, planting crops to feed my people, and building walls and defenses to protect against raiders. It was some pretty damn good fun. My fellow 4 players have brought up some interesting points in recent weeks about the game, though, that I feel I need to address if I'm going to put this game at the number 6 slot on my list. For one, I simply must address the Pip-Boy, which is easily the biggest crutch of the entire Fallout experience from 3 on. To me, the Pip-Boy is fine, if a tad limited, as it feels like there should be a better way to manage your inventory beyond just favoriting items or assigning keys to them. The biggest problem with the Pip-Boy this time around, though, is VATS, and even then, it's pretty much a non-issue. When Oblivion came out, one of the biggest put-offs was the combat system for me. How everything felt exceptionally janky and didn't give me the right amount of feedback to make me feel like I was doing anything more than flailing a sword around. When Skyrim came out, however, it was an entirely different ballgame, with great feedback, parrying, and, most importantly, power behind your weapons. The same transition has happened from Fallout 3 to 4, with an exceptional improvement in weaponry and gunplay that makes VATS almost unnecessary. In fact, I found myself rarely playing with VATS at all, as it was so much slower than just taking aim myself and getting the job done. Also, the size of the world is fine. Sure, it's technically on scale with Skyrim, and it's indeed smaller than Fallout 3's Capital Wasteland, but the great thing is that it feels just as dense, full of things to find and explore. There's no problem there in my book. Fallout 4 is simply a great game, though it's more of an iteration than an evolution compared to its predecessor. As of this recording, Bethesda has not yet made mention of the DLC plans for the game, but considering I put over 100 hours into it without even approaching anything resembling an in-game scenario, I don't mind the wait. When one thinks of 4-player, many irrational things come to mind. The roar of a maniacal road warrior shouting at his scooter brother, the screams of terror at the sight of a Japanese ghost seen through the lens of a spirit camera, the cries of disbelief as a giant penguin passes by the main character in a race to beat Mario 64. However, I don't think anybody could forget the act of latching onto a skybound burning explosive barrel and riding into the heavens as the words "fuck it, I'm out" are yelled at the top of Brad's lungs, like was done in Just Cause 2. However, I found myself without appreciation for this game as I'd never found myself in a position to play it. With the release of a full sequel this past December, I finally got the chance to find out just what all the ruckus was about. And man, oh man, was it fun. Just Cause 3 is probably the greatest palate cleanser of 2015, if not one of the best games to arrive that year. In a year of grimdark shooters, epic fantasy adventures, and manliness-destroying emotional experiences, Just Cause 3's simple premise was alluring and, after a while, intoxicating. Traverse a series of Mediterranean islands ruled by a fascist dictator, eliminate his forces, and return peace to the country in as comical a fashion as you choose. It was unwavering in its gratuitous and zany nature, but oh man did I indulge. More than anything else in the game, two tools at the player's disposal made Just Cause 3 go from a fun mercenaries-like romp to an exceptionally fun experience. The first of which was your grappling hook. Now, I've seen various videos and GIFs of the years past from Just Cause 2 that hinted at the possibility of this tool, but man oh man, was it a fantastic complement to almost everything you could do. It made for some of the most deliciously fun and comical escapades I had experienced all year. Tethering an enemy helicopter to the truck I was driving, and then having it explode as I hit the upper wall of the tunnel I was driving through. That tool was great. The gunplay was decent for an open world game, but man, when combined with the grappling hook, the possibilities were wonderful. That being said, I don't think I had any more fun with this game than when I would activate the wingsuit and just start flying around the islands. At first, sure, the wingsuit is a bit unwieldy and demanding, but after a while, once you've learned to properly judge building height and takeoff distance, it's simply a tremendously fun tool. There were nights in which I would spend whole hours flying around Medici, exploring this incredibly vast and beautiful map with almost no care given to the lack of things to find in the world. It was almost magical in how much fun it was, and for the first time in an open world game, I gave almost no attention to the fast travel system or any land-based vehicle. In the midst of a tightly packed holiday season, Avalanche's latest tile was just what I needed to keep my head on straight. It's certainly not the best open world experience to be had, but it's probably the one I enjoyed the most this past year. There are a lot of great things one could say when thinking about Just Cause 3, but I don't think anything else could sum up my feelings about it as well as this. It's just plain fun. Halo is a series I've loved since its inception. From Comet Evolved's Installation 04 to the burning plains of Reach, Bungie's work on the franchise was simply tremendous. When Halo was bought out by Microsoft and Bungie disappeared to work on Destiny, many were uncertain as to whether the newly formed 343 Industries could rise to the challenge and deliver a proper Halo experience that could be on par with what its preceding studio was capable of. Halo 4 answered the question for me, but not in a positive manner. It just didn't feel right. From the combat changes to the new enemy faction, the sound design to the disappointing narrative, it wasn't what we had come to know and love. So it went for nearly 3 years in which I followed the news of the continuing storyline and development in hesitation, worried that we had already seen the best 343 had to offer. And then things started to take a positive turn. Little pieces started appearing. Hints of refined combat, a return to the older, far more entertaining sound design for the Covenant, promises of improvements to the Prometheans. However, I wasn't sold on the game until I read 2 words. Blue Team. You see, as I previously mentioned, I'm a Halo aficionado. I've played all the main games, I've read a vast majority of the books. I know most of the lore through and through, and everything from the precursors to the Sangheli I can probably carry on a good conversation about. So when I learned that Blue Team, the original squad of Master Chief John 117, Linda 058, Fred 104, and Kelly 087 would be fighting together, playable for the first time in the history of the franchise, it wasn't 2 minutes before I was on Amazon ordering my copy. With this news came a renewed optimism for what could come. The lore of the greater universe finally coming into play in the games. Halo 5 Guardians is very much the game I hoped it would be. The game's campaign, albeit shorter than most seen before in the series, was a near gigantic leap forward from where we were in 2012 when John and Cortana accidentally awoke and were forced to defeat, at great cost, the legendary Didact. Picking up sometime later, we were given a story that wasn't what we expected to be. Blue Team's hunt for what could be Cortana and Team Osiris, comprised of several characters from the recent novels as well as the very welcome return of Gunnery Sergeant Buck from ODST, who was hunting Blue Team across the domains of the Human Covenant War of just a few years prior, as a great, unknown upheaval threatens the inhabitants of the galaxy. It was a grand adventure full of surprises both good and tolerable. Some welcome, such as slow moments outside of combat that established the setting and the characters you met, to others that weren't as desired, like the game's emphasis on giving Osiris way more screen time than Blue Team. The game concludes on a moment of sequel mongering that's to be expected from the middle entry in a trilogy, but man did it leave me excited for what's to come. Outside of the combat though, I found some of the most exciting multiplayer fun I've had since Halo 2 launched a decade ago. Though the game does carry with it the typical arrangement of arena multiplayer modes that you've come to expect from a Halo game, I found myself investing an unhealthy amount of hours into Warzone, a separate but fantastic experience that I adore. In this 12v12 experience, two teams are pitted against one another to capture and hold strong points on the map to earn victory points. Teams that are able to take control of all 3 points on the map have a chance to destroy the opposing team's core at their base for an instant victory. All while this is going on, enemy AI will regularly appear on the map that grants large amounts of victory points should the player successfully eliminate the threat. The result is a fun mix of offensive and defensive combat, punctuated with races to eliminate AI opponents that can be delightfully stressful. To complement this, and no doubt bank some cash on the side, 343 implemented a Mass Effect style requisition system that is directly tied to Warzone, and quickly becomes one of the driving points in the mode. As players progress through Warzone, they are granted access to requisition levels that unlock the ability to use weapon, character, and vehicle unlocks, similar to Titanfall's burn cards. You'd be surprised to learn that the result is decently balanced and engaging. Playing a card at the right moment of a match can dramatically shift things in your team's favor, a la a Scorpion that holds an enemy team at bay from attacking your stronghold, or perhaps an Overshield that helps you take over an enemy one. I found myself playing every single day, excited to see what I'd unlock and upgrade my Spartan with, and I think, despite words to the contrary for some naysayers, that Warzone may be one of the best ideas for online multiplayer of the past several years. Halo 5 Guardians is simply a terrific game, and a well-deserved return to form for the franchise. It's still lacking that invisible layer of love that Bungie somehow coded into their entries in the series, but for my money, Halo 5 is one of the most entertaining experiences that released in 2015. I'm going to be honest with you. In all the years I've been at 4Player, I've never really put any particular care or attention into From Software's sole series of games. I'll readily admit I'm a little biased against the world design and grimdark high fantasy nature that these games revel in. Nor am I attracted to the idea of having death and failure being a selling point to the game. I mean, come on, who actually enjoys losing at a game? Certainly not this guy. Everyone here could hoot and holler all day long about how much they love demons and Dark Souls, but at the end of the day, it's just not my cup of tea. So it was of some exceptional surprise when I got Bloodborne, From Software's latest in the series of masochism games, and gave it a couple hours and quickly found myself running through it without a question of thinking. The frustration ingrained in this franchise aside, I slowly adapted to the harsh conditions of Yharnam, learned the nature of the parry system, the nuances of the enemies, and reveled in the death of a boss after the 23rd try. Seriously, fuck Rom and everything he goddamn stands for. Of all the things I enjoyed about Bloodborne, I found myself gleefully drowning in the production assets and the world design. Initially, I expected Bloodborne to be a gothic werewolf palooza, and for a good portion of the game, it kinda is. However, once you began to move past Yharnam into the countryside and what lies beyond, I kinda fell in love with an incredible amount of what I saw and explored. Even forgiving the obvious enemy design crutches such as the giant spiders and Resident Evil 4 villagers, the enemy and world design was fantastic. Finding areas like the forest's poisonous cave of giants, or even the hidden workshop, were wonderful surprises that completely made me rethink area traversal and exploration. I feel like it's my duty, however, to bring up a sticking point I've had with the game, and what has become a running joke of mine over the past year. Bloodborne's lore. Now before you groan and click ahead, let me make my case. Yes, I'm fully aware that Bloodborne has a grand storyline and characters within that weave together the threads of a potentially magnificent universe. However, I find myself at odds with how this information is conveyed to the player. From start to finish of this game, I found myself feeling like I was joining in media res without a proper background as to why exactly I'm here. All I know is that I'm a nameless hunter of the night, and my mission is to purge Arkham of the blood curse that has infected it and its surrounding lands. Okay, I get that. What I don't get is why the game doesn't attempt at all to spell out exactly what is happening, why it's happening, the point of my character, the meaning behind the character's present, and just how the hell I'm impacting the world. I feel like, as big as this universe implies itself to be, it wants me to go searching for the truth rather than simply profess it to me. I want to learn, sure, but I shouldn't have to read item descriptions or watch a YouTube video to gain a greater understanding as to what the deal is with the brain of Mensis or Abritus. Sometimes there's nothing wrong with just giving me a cutscene with some straight exposition. That's all I'm saying. Despite my narrative misgivings and the somewhat infuriating nature of the game's bosses, I really enjoyed my time with Bloodborne. Does it entice me to explore the rest of From Software's lineup? Nah. But give me a new game about the Hunters of the Night and a little more specific exposition, I'll be there day one. I think some of my fondest gaming memories comes from playing Rainbow Six Black Arrow online with friends on the original Xbox. Memorizing maps, trying to correctly calculate where an opponent would be, and the exact time to throw a white phosphorus grenade at them, figuring out which sight lines would prevent flanking. I love this series. Despite having been built on the foundation of a single-player, tactics-focused experience, Rainbow Six has steadily been increasing the scope of its multiplayer component over the past decade and a half. It's been almost 8 years now since the last proper Rainbow game arrived on store shelves, and what we have here is a dramatically different one, focused entirely on multiplayer with nary a sign of single-player anywhere to be found, alongside a rebuilt Team Rainbow headed up by an Amanda Waller lookalike, and devoid of any familiar faces. But how does a new Rainbow game, entirely focused on multiplayer, retailing at $60 and focused entirely on attrition-based combat fare? The answer? Exceptionally well. Siege's biggest selling point is easily the game's simple yet elegant basis. Siege warfare. 2 teams of 5 players are tasked with assaulting or defending a building from one another, each player tasking themselves with a different element of preparation as one of the 20 unique operators you can play as. Each feels quite distinct and serves a specific purpose, but you'll find very few instances in which an operator isn't a decent choice. Blitz, one of the assaulting operators for example, is equipped with a riot shield that can blind enemies with a sudden flash. Smoke, on the other hand, has the ability to deploy remote detonation toxic gas grenades that severely damage anybody caught within. Each attacker seems to have a proper responsive counterpart. Thermite's thermobaric charges can destroy reinforced walls, while Bandit's batteries can electrify them and destroy any breaching charge. Fuse can activate a remote mini grenade launcher that pierces thin walls, while Jaeger's active defense systems can destroy any grenade that is launched within its radius. In a game that's so supremely focused on class-based team play, it's a wonder just how often you find yourself not finding a useful character to play as. Siege isn't all new, however. The classic terrorist hunt mode returns, and this time around, the enemy seems much more vicious than ever before. Between various classes of white masked terrorists, you'll find plenty of reasons to keep you cautious. From shield-wielding distractors to heavily armored suicide bombers, the white masks will give you no quarter if you aren't careful. By far the most entertaining parts of Terror Hunt for me were the hostage defense missions, in which you play as a defensive operator that must fend off against 5 waves of terrorists from getting to your hapless civilian. Even after fortifying all the walls, windows, and doors with what little you have to work with to help defend against that coming onslaught, there is no guarantee of success thanks to the capabilities of the AI. Enemy terrorists are capable of the same basic actions any player is throughout Siege and more, making it quite hard, and risky, to camp without the white mask breaching the wall beside you, rappelling through a window, or charging at you with C4 strapped to their chests. It's intense, nail-biting fun that I look forward to upon every play session, and I'm certain that many players would agree. For many people, this isn't the Rainbow experience they wanted, and I can understand why. It demands an investment both money and time-wise that most would probably reserve for a full-fledged, multi-mode title. However, beyond the haze of hype and hyperbole exists a rock-solid gameplay rule set, the likes of which only comes around every few years. Rainbow Six Siege over the past month and a half has become one of my favorite experiences of the year, and given the hints presented thus far by Ubisoft and the free content schedule that awaits players, I can't wait to see what's in store in the months to come. It's pretty rare for me to sit down and play an episodic game. I like my games complete and all in one place without having to wait 2 months or 3 months or 4 months even for the next 2 to 3 hour play session that is typical of the medium. If you were to count up every single episodic game series I've played in the past 5 years, you wouldn't even need a second hand to account for them all. Despite the fact that the episodic format is very conducive to telling a narrative, its distribution schedule is what could drive me close to insane. After a year of positive press and community praise for Life is Strange, though, I felt that a Steam sale purchase was probably in order to find out what all the hullabaloo was about. After waiting a year for the story to complete, I'm now certain that I made the right decision in not indulging in it until the season was over, because I absolutely surged through it. Perhaps the biggest thing Life is Strange has going for it is how wonderfully it subverts the formula episodic games have been built upon ever since the first season of The Walking Dead arrived. You know what I'm talking about. Enter an area, talk to everyone, and check out everything in sight. Solve a puzzle or two, segue to a quick time event, maybe an action sequence, and then repeat it all over again. It's a formula that Telltale has mastered, but it only works so long as it continues to have entertaining elements built within the formula. With Don't Nod's inclusion of the rewind mechanic, however, pretty much everything you know about this gameplay methodology can be subverted, and, in some cases, completely change the way you would typically play one of these games. And by far, it's one of Life is Strange's biggest highlights. I simply love how Don't Nod chose to have the rewind system be the absolute focus of the gameplay. Rewind weaves itself into every aspect of play, from conversations to decision points to action sequences. One minute you'll be having a conversation with a character whom you know next to nothing about, only to rewind and then start the conversation again with these new details, allowing you new branching dialogue options and a potentially different outcome to what's happening. The rewind system also functions as a built-in replay tool, as you're allowed in most instances to see the immediate outcomes of key decisions you've made, without having to completely replay the episode. Every single little puzzle idea you think such a mechanic could be used for is very well done. Just as accomplished, however, is the story. As I've said many times before, I'm a story guy, so games with a quality narrative will always suck me in faster than any gameplay system could. Life is Strange has that in spades for me, thanks to our pair of protagonists and the mysteries they try to solve over the course of the season. Max and Chloe, played masterfully by Hannah Telle and Ashley Birch respectively, are exceptionally well written, and the cast of recurring characters only serves to reinforce just how much you grow to care for the pair. Rarely in the game will you ever find yourself at odds with them, and when those moments come, they end up giving some well-deserved time in the spotlight for side characters. Neither character is a paragon of virtue, but Chloe and Max find a way to tug at your heartstrings every single episode. For me, though, the biggest surprise of the game is the narrative's pacing. A story can be good based on the contents of the narrative, but if it's too slow or too fast on its delivery, it can be very detrimental to the overall quality of what you experience. Life is Strange doesn't have this problem, though, thanks to the scenes the players are presented with, as well as how it takes advantage of the episodic nature of the game. As the story plays out over 5 episodes, the ominous nature of what lies ahead drives you forward. It never makes you want to pause or stop what you're doing. You know that something terrible is on the horizon, but you don't know what it is, whether it's actually real or even whether you can stop it or not. Each episode ends with a terrible sign of what's to come, be it an unexplained snowstorm or a misuse of Max's rewind capability. No episode ever ends without at least the threat of consequences to come. Life is Strange is a tremendous game. I wish I could talk about it more, but I'm out of time. I'm just really glad I got to experience it this year, even if I didn't get to do it until the waning days of December. Not since Portal 1 has my brain been tested as well as this game demands, and no other game this year has had me sitting on the edge of my seat, smiling from a place of innocence and reeling from emotional gut punches. Life is indeed strange, but also wonderful. So much so that it tops my list of the best games of 2015.
You kind of love this, don't you? Fine. I'll try being like you for a change.
Well, that's it for me, guys, and this concludes our staff top 10 list series for the year. This isn't the end of our Game of the Year coverage, though. We've still got our awards show podcast, as well as the community top 10 games and highlights videos coming in the next few days, so please stay tuned. Please accept my apologies for having you wait this long for the remaining content to come out, but when it does, I hope you feel it was worth the wait. Thanks for watching, and I hope you stick with us in 2016.